I still remember that night as if it happened yesterday. The rain was pouring heavily, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. And the wind howled through the cracks of the old house. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. And there was an uneasy silence that made every creak of the floor sound like a warning. I had just finished my evening tea, sitting alone in the living room, when I heard a loud knock at the door. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the knocking came again, more urgent this time, almost angry. My heart skipped a beat and a shiver ran down my spine. Something felt wrong. It was late, much later than anyone would normally visit. I wasn't expecting anyone. As I opened the door slowly, I was met with a sight I never thought I'd see in my own home, my daughter-in-law standing there, drenched from the rain, her face twisted in fury. The moment our eyes met, I felt a wave of fear mixed with disbelief. She didn't even greet me. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger, and she demanded, "Give me the house keys now." I froze. My hands shook and I could barely speak. This was my home, the place where I had spent decades of my life, raised my family, and kept memories that were priceless. Yet here she was, standing like a storm, ready to destroy everything. I tried to reason with her, my voice quivering. Why? Why are you doing this? These keys are not yours to take. But she didn't listen. Her eyes were full of fire, and in a split second, before I could react, her hand shot forward and she slapped me across the face. The pain and shock made me stumble backward. The sound of the slap echoed in the room, mingling with the thunder outside. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, not just from the pain, but from the betrayal, the anger, and the fear that someone I trusted could turn against me so quickly. I tried to understand what had happened, why she was acting this way. I knew tensions had been rising in our family, but I never imagined it would reach this point. My son, her husband, was supposed to protect me, but where was he now? I didn't know. I felt completely alone in that moment. Every nerve in my body screamed to resist, to fight, but fear rooted me in place. She kept repeating, "The keys, now." Her voice was sharp, desperate, almost threatening. I remember glancing around the living room, my mind racing. There were family photos on the walls, my son as a child, us celebrating birthdays, all the laughter frozen in frames. And yet, here was someone I had trusted, threatening to take it all away in one angry moment. I could hear the rain pounding harder, like the world itself was mirroring the storm in my heart. The clock ticked loudly, each second dragging like an eternity dot. Then something even stranger happened. As she reached for the keys, I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from her coat pocket. My curiosity overpowered my fear for a moment. What was that? A letter. A threat. My hands trembled as I tried to step closer to see, but she noticed and tightened her grip on the keys. Her eyes flashed, warning me to back off. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. The fear, the anger, the confusion, all of it mixed into a tight knot in my stomach before I could say anything else. She grabbed the keys with a force that made them jingle sharply in the silence. And just as she turned to leave, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I could barely make out her figure, drenched and towering in the dim flashes of lightning outside. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. I was left alone, shivering, my cheek burning from the slap. And a terrifying thought running through my mind. Why did she want the keys? And what was she planning to do with them? I sank into the sofa, the room dark, except for the occasional flash of lightning. Every sound outside, the wind, the rain, the distant bark of a dog, felt amplified, as if warning me that something bigger was about to unfold. I didn't know what to do. Should I call my son? Should I run after her? My hands were still trembling, and I felt a cold emptiness settle in my chest. The house, which had always been my safe place, now felt like a trap. As I sat there in the dark, I heard a faint sound, a whisper of movement outside. My heart skipped again. Could it be her returning? Or was it someone else? Fear tightened around me like a cage, and I realized that this night was only the beginning. Something had shifted in my home, in my family, and I could feel it deep in my bones. The calm I had known was gone, and I had no idea what storm was waiting just beyond my door. And then, just when I thought I might calm down, I heard a soft click, the sound of a lock turning, coming from somewhere in the house. I still remember that night as if it were carved into my memory forever. The darkness in the house felt heavier now, pressing down on me like a living thing. My cheeks still stung from her slap, and my hands shook uncontrollably. That soft click, the sound of a lock turning somewhere, echoed in my ears. I froze, barely daring to breathe. My mind screamed that I had to act, but my body refused to move. Fear had rooted me to the spot. I could hear my own heartbeat, thundering so loudly it seemed to fill every corner of the room. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows, masking other sounds but also creating a strange, eerie rhythm that made my skin crawl. Shadows from the lightning flashes danced across the walls, turning ordinary furniture into monstrous shapes. I felt as if the house itself had come alive, conspiring against me, hiding secrets I wasn't ready to face. Slowly, I rose from the sofa, gripping the armrest as though it could anchor me against the tide of fear rushing through me. My first thought was to check the doors to make sure she hadn't left anything behind that could put me in danger. I tiptoed toward the hallway, listening to every creak and groan of the floorboards. My breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. Every step I took felt louder than it should, and I feared that she or someone else might hear me. As I reached the kitchen, a strange chill ran through my body. The window above the sink was slightly open, letting in a cold gust of wind that smelled of wet earth and something else, something metallic. My stomach churned. Was it just the rain, or had she left something behind? My eyes darted around, scanning every shadow, every corner, but nothing seemed out of place, or at least nothing that I could clearly see. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a voice carried by the wind. I froze again, straining to listen. It wasn't outside, it was inside the house. My pulse quickened, and my legs felt like they were made of lead. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking more than I realized. Silence. Only the rain answered, tapping insistently against the roof. I took a hesitant step forward, and then the whisper came again, so soft I could barely hear it. My name. My own name. I spun around, searching for the source, my hands trembling. My imagination ran wild. Had she come back? Was it a stranger? Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me after what had just happened? The fear in me demanded I run, but curiosity, dangerous curiosity, pushed me forward. My eyes caught something on the floor near the living room. A small folded note. My hands shook as I picked it up. My eyes widened as I read the words scrawled in a hurried, almost angry handwriting. "If you want the truth about your family, come to the old shed behind the house, midnight, alone." A cold shiver ran down my spine. What truth? What could she possibly want me to know that would make her attack me over house keys? I felt a mix of dread and anger. My son, my own child, was tied up in this somehow. I was sure of it. But why? And why now? The note fell from my fingers as I realized the time. Midnight was only 30 minutes away. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to lock every door and call the police. But another part, the part that had always tried to fix family problems, felt drawn toward it. I thought of my son, of the years we had spent together, and I feared the worst. What if this was a trap? What if she was planning something even worse than before? Every rational thought screamed at me to stay inside, to hide, to wait until morning, but my heart, stubborn and foolish, pushed me toward the shed. I grabbed a small flashlight from the drawer and stepped outside. The rain had slowed, but the ground was slippery and cold. Mud stuck to my shoes, and the wind bit at my face. The shed loomed ahead, dark and weathered, with shadows moving in strange ways across its surface. I paused for a moment, heart hammering, trying to convince myself this was the right thing to do. The note had been clear. I had to go alone. But something in me screamed that this could be a trap meant to hurt me or worse. As I approached the shed, noticed the door was slightly ajar, just enough to let me peer inside. The faint glow of a lantern flickered within, casting long shadows across the walls. My hands shook as I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, I could barely make out shapes barrels, old tools, and in the corner, something that looked like a pile of blankets or clothing. And then I saw her, my daughter-in-law, standing there, holding something in her hand. Something shiny. Keys? No, not the keys. Something else. My breath caught in my throat. Before I could ask a single question, she spoke. Her voice calm now, but cold, like ice running through a river. "You should have stayed in your house," she said. And just as the words left her mouth, I felt a sudden movement behind me, a shadow moving in the corner of the shed that wasn't hers. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Something was about to happen. I could feel it in every nerve of my body. I still remember that night as if it were etched into my soul. The air inside the shed was damp and heavy, smelling of old wood and rain-soaked earth. My chest heaved, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. My daughter-in-law stood there, calm and composed. But there was a dangerous intensity in her eyes that made me step back instinctively. I could feel the cold beam of my flashlight shaking in my hands, casting long, quivering shadows across the walls. And then I saw the movement again. The shadows shifted behind the piles of old blankets and tools. My stomach twisted in fear. Who else was there? I wanted to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. Panic was clawing its way up my chest, making my limbs feel heavy and my heart race like a trapped bird. I took a tentative step forward, my mind screaming to turn and run. But something deeper pushed me to stay. I needed answers. I had to know what was happening in my family, why she had attacked me, why she had taken the keys. Who's there? I finally managed to whisper, my voice trembling. Silence answered me, thick and oppressive. I could hear only the faint dripping of water from the shed's roof and the distant rumble of thunder from the storm outside. My daughter-in-law's eyes flicked to the corner, and I noticed the faintest twitch in her lips, almost like a smirk. Was she enjoying this fear? Or was she afraid to? I slowly stepped closer to the shadow, every instinct screaming at me to stop. Then, just as I reached the pile, a figure leaped out, a man unknown to me, tall and cloaked in darkness. My flashlight fell from my hands, rolling across the wet floor with a clatter. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. My daughter-in-law moved quickly, grabbing the keys from her pocket and holding them like a shield between me and the stranger. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice steady now, almost threatening. "I warned you." The man stepped closer, and I could finally see his face, partially illuminated by a flicker of the lantern. My eyes widened in shock. It was someone I had trusted, someone I had never expected to see in this situation. His expression was hard, eyes cold, yet there was a hint of regret hidden beneath the surface. My mind raced. What was he doing here? Was he working with her, against me, or something else entirely? "Stay back," I managed to say, though my voice was shaky. Fear and anger mixed into a heavy weight in my chest. "Why are you here? What is happening?" The man didn't answer. He just stared, and the silence between us was deafening. My daughter-in-law's hand tightened around the keys. "The truth," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "It's time you know the truth about your family." I felt a cold dread sink deep into my bones. The words "truth about your family" echoed in my mind. I had lived my life believing I knew everything about my loved ones. But now everything seemed uncertain, fragile, and dangerous. The man in front of me stepped closer again, and this time the lantern caught his face fully. My heart lurched. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. My mind was clouded with fear, suspicion, and confusion. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but the shed felt like a cage. My daughter-in-law held the keys out to me, a strange, almost pleading gesture, and said, "Take them, but listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you will change everything." I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I reached out. The moment I touched the keys, the lantern flickered violently, and a sudden crash came from behind me. Something heavy had fallen in the shadows. I spun around, heart racing, and froze. There in the corner, the shadow I had seen before was moving again, larger now, almost monstrous in shape. My pulse thumped violently in my ears. Before I could even scream, my daughter-in-law whispered urgently, "Don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around." I didn't understand, but instinct screamed at me to obey. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the shed itself was holding its breath. Every sound, the dripping water, the wind outside, the creaking of old wood seemed amplified. I could feel my body trembling uncontrollably. My hands clenched the keys tightly, but they felt like they were burning me. Heavy with secrets I wasn't ready to bear. And then I heard it. A voice, low and guttural, coming from the shadows. Not a whisper this time, but a sound that made my blood run cold. A single word repeated over and over: "Run." I still remember that night as if the darkness itself had carved it into my mind. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it might burst from my chest. I clutched the house keys tightly, my knuckles white, as the voice from the shadows repeated its chilling warning. "Run." The words seemed to echo in every corner of the shed, bouncing off the old wood and damp walls, and yet I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy, frozen in place by fear. I glanced at my daughter-in-law. She stood rigid, her eyes fixed on the shadows, lips pressed together in a thin line. There was a strange mix of fear and determination in her gaze. I realized then that whatever was out there was not something ordinary. My mind tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was a burglar or some animal, but my instincts screamed otherwise. The air in the shed was thick and cold, and I could almost feel the weight of something unseen pressing down on me. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, casting distorted shapes on the walls. In that brief flash, I thought I saw movement figures emerging from the shadows. Or maybe the shadows themselves moving. I froze, heart racing, unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me. The stranger shifted slightly, stepping closer to me. I still couldn't recognize him completely. His face remained partly hidden, but there was a look in his eyes that made my stomach twist with unease. My daughter-in-law spoke again, her voice low and urgent. "Listen carefully. Everything you've believed about your family is a lie. That's why I took the keys. That's why I brought you here." I shook my head, disbelief and fear mingling in my chest. "What? What are you talking about?" "Lies, my family." "I don't understand." Her eyes softened for a moment, and I noticed a hint of pain behind her anger. "You've been kept in the dark for too long. Some things were hidden from you to protect you, but the truth, it's time you face it." Before I could ask another question, the shadow in the corner moved closer. It was no longer just a shadow, it had form, a figure hunched and barely visible, but moving with an unnatural stillness. I could feel the tension in the air, a cold pressure that made it hard to breathe. My hands shook as I tried to grip the keys tighter. The stranger stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding me, yet it also sent a shiver down my spine. "You need to see this," he said quietly. "You need to know the truth before it's too late." I followed him, my legs weak, my mind spinning. The shed felt larger than before, the darkness deeper, more suffocating. Every step I took made the floorboards creak, sounding like a warning that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to ripple around me, moving in ways that no normal light or object could explain. I wanted to turn back, to flee into the storm outside, but something inside met the need to know. To protect what was mine pushed me forward. Then I saw it. Behind a stack of old wooden crates, partially hidden by a tattered curtain, there was a small, locked chest. The stranger gestured toward it, his face tense. "This contains what you need to know, but be careful. Once you open it, nothing will ever be the same." My heart pounded, fear and curiosity warring in my chest. I reached for the chest, my fingers trembling, the metal cold under my touch. The lock was old but sturdy, and as I twisted it open, a strange, musty smell rose from inside. I hesitated for a moment, swallowing hard. Then slowly I lifted the lid. Inside, were photographs, letters, and documents. My hands shook as I sifted through them, unable to believe my eyes. Faces I recognized, people I trusted, secrets I had never imagined, they were all here, laid bare in front of me. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A letter addressed to me. In my son's handwriting, I unfolded it carefully, my hands quivering. The words were simple, but the meaning was devastating. I am sorry, Mom. You were never meant to know this, but the truth cannot stay hidden forever. Trust no one, not even me. Protect yourself. I froze, my mind spinning, the rain outside forgotten, the wind outside drowned out by the roaring in my head. What truth could be so terrible that my own son felt he could not tell me? And why was my daughter-in-law involved? Before I could process the letter, a sudden sound, a loud crash, like something heavy falling, echoed through the shed. The shadows shifted violently, and the lantern flickered, throwing the room into near-complete darkness. I felt a hand on my arm, but when I turned, no one was there. And then I heard it again, the low, guttural whisper, repeating over and over, "Run, or lose everything." I still remember that night as if it were burned into my mind. The rain had eased slightly outside, leaving the air heavy with dampness and the scent of wet earth. But inside the shed, the darkness seemed to thicken, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. My hands still trembled as I clutched the letters and photographs I had found. My heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. I glanced at my daughter-in-law. Her face was pale in the flickering lantern light, her eyes full of a strange mixture of anger, fear, and regret. I wanted to ask her why she had done all this, why she had come to my house, slapped me, and taken the keys, but the moment felt too charged, too dangerous. The air seemed electric, each sound amplified. The faint drip of water from the roof, the rustle of the old crates, and the faint, almost imperceptible movement in the shadows. I opened another envelope, shaking. Inside was a series of letters, all written in my son's hand, but with a tone I had never seen before. Desperate, fearful, and secretive. My eyes scanned the words, and I felt my stomach churn. The letters spoke of hidden debts, dangerous acquaintances, and a series of decisions he had made to protect the family, but decisions that had only pulled us closer to danger. My mind reeled. How could my son, my own child, have kept something so serious from me? And then I found a photograph that made my blood run cold. It showed my daughter-in-law, my son, and another man I didn't recognize, standing in front of what looked like a warehouse. But there was something off, something sinister in the way they were positioned, their expressions tense and guarded. I traced the man's face with my finger, my mind racing. Who was he? And why was he in my son's life? Before I could ponder further, I felt a sudden movement behind me. My daughter-in-law stiffened, her eyes darting to the shadows once more. "It's here," she whispered, her voice trembling despite her calm exterior. I froze, heart hammering, staring into the darkness. The shadow moved again, and this time could make out the vague outline of a figure, tall and looming, shifting closer with each heartbeat. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Fear had a grip on me I had never experienced before. The stranger in the shadows was silent, but I could sense a presence that was almost tangible, a cold, heavy force that made my skin crawl. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't leave without understanding what was happening, without knowing the truth about my son, my daughter-in-law, and the hidden dangers surrounding my family. My daughter-in-law stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "Listen carefully. You need to take this. Whatever happens next. Protect yourself. Protect what's yours." She handed me a small envelope, tightly sealed. I took it with trembling hands, my mind racing with questions. I didn't even dare open it yet. I feared what it might contain. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, casting wild shadows across the walls. I felt something brush against my arm, not my daughter-in-law, not the stranger, and I jumped back, stumbling over a crate. The envelope slipped from my hands, landing on the floor with a soft thud. I scrambled to pick it up, but before I could, a low, Guttural voice filled the shed again. Closer this time. You shouldn't be here. My chest tightened, and I could feel my pulse in my temples. The shadows seemed to grow taller, stretching across the walls like dark, living fingers. I could hear the faint rustle of movement all around me, coming from places I couldn't see. My daughter-in-law grabbed my arm, her grip firm, and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." I hesitated, torn between fear and the burning need to know the truth. But before I could decide, a loud crash came from the corner of the shed, and something heavy fell to the floor. I froze, eyes wide, heart racing. Then I realized with horror that envelope had been ripped open by an unseen force, and its contents were now scattered across the floor, among the papers. I could see one particular document partially unfolded. My eyes widened as I read a single line that made my blood run cold. If you proceed, you risk losing everything you love. The house, your family, even your life. My breath caught in my throat. The words weren't just a warning, they were a promise. And I suddenly understood that the danger wasn't just outside this shed or in the shadows. It was closer, much closer than I had imagined. And then, in the darkness, I heard a step. One single, deliberate step approaching from behind. I still remember that night as if every shadow, every whisper, every heartbeat had been etched into my very soul. My body was frozen with fear, and my hands shook uncontrollably as I clutched the letters and documents strewn across the floor. The single step I had heard moments ago had stopped, leaving a heavy silence in its place. I could feel the presence behind me, something dark, tense, almost alive. Waiting for me to make a wrong move, my daughter-in-law tightened her grip on my arm. Her eyes darted nervously toward the shadows, then back at me. "You need to stay calm," she whispered, her voice urgent yet almost desperate. "Whatever is coming, it's testing you." I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself out of the shed into the rain and darkness outside. But my curiosity, my desperate need to understand what was happening in my family, rooted me to the spot. My pulse was pounding so loudly that it felt like it might give away my position, and yet the figure in the shadows didn't move. It was waiting slowly. I turned my head just a little enough to glimpse the approaching presence. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a stranger. It was my son. But something was wrong. His face was pale, almost ghostly in the flickering lantern light, and his eyes. They were hard, cold, distant. There was an unfamiliar tension in his jaw, a quiet threat in the way he moved. I couldn't recognize him. The son I had raised, trusted, and loved seemed replaced by someone I didn't know. "Mom," he said, his voice low, steady, but with a strange edge I had never heard before. "You weren't supposed to see this tonight." I stumbled backward, my heart aching, confusion and fear battling inside me. "Son, what's happening? Why did she take the keys? Why all this?" I gestured to my daughter-in-law and the scattered letters on the floor. He shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "It's bigger than you know. Bigger than us. You weren't meant to get involved." His eyes flicked toward my daughter-in-law, then back at me. "But now, it's too late. You've seen too much." My mind spun. What could be so dangerous that even my own son feared it? My daughter-in-law stepped forward, placing herself slightly between us. "You need to hear everything," she said firmly. "Everything your son and I have been hiding. But you have to promise me you cannot react rashly. If you do, it could destroy us all." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat preventing me from speaking. I nodded, even though my hands were shaking and my heart felt ready to burst. "I promise," I whispered, barely audible. Then my son reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. This one marked with a single word in bold letters: "Secrets." He handed it to me, but the moment my fingers touched it, a cold wind swept through the shed, extinguishing the lantern. Darkness swallowed everything. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, moving like living creatures around me. I heard whispers now. Not one voice, but many echoing, urgent, warning me. Leave, run, danger. The voices made my skin crawl. And yet I couldn't let go of the envelope. Something inside me insisted I open it, that the truth had to be known, no matter how frightening. I took a deep breath, knelt on the wet floor, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were more letters, photographs, and documents than I had seen before. As I sifted through them, my hands trembling, my mind reeled. Names I recognized were connected to people I had never suspected. Decisions made in secret. Alliances formed behind closed doors. Lies that had been built over years. And then I found something that made me scream silently inside. A document bearing my own name, signed in my son's handwriting, stating that my life, my home, and even my freedom were at risk because of secrets I had never known. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the papers. Suddenly, a heavy presence pressed closer behind me. I felt it before I could see it, a cold, threatening weight that seemed to be waiting for me to make a mistake. I dared not turn. My daughter-in-law whispered urgently, "Don't look. Whatever you do, don't look." I felt a hand grab my shoulder from behind, firm and unyielding. And a voice whispered directly into my ear, "Now you know too much. And now you must pay the price." I still remember that night as if it were the longest, darkest night of my life. The shed felt alive, each shadow moving like it had a will of its own. My heart pounded in my chest so loudly that I could hear it over the faint, insistent dripping of water from the roof. My hands were cold and trembling, clutching the letters and documents. But it was the hand on my shoulder, the one gripping me so tightly, that made me freeze in absolute terror. The voice that whispered in my ear before. The one that promised I would pay the price made my skin crawl. I wanted to turn to see who it was, but fear rooted me to the spot. My daughter-in-law's whisper cut through my panic. "Stay still. Don't turn around. Whatever happens next, it's beyond anything you could imagine." I could feel the presence behind me shift slightly, the pressure intensifying. It was like standing against a wall of ice, chilling me to my very bones. My mind raced, trying to piece together everything: the attack at home, the stolen keys, the letters, the photographs, my son's secretive behavior. Now it all made sense. That someone or something was using this web of secrets to control and trap us. Then my son stepped closer into the lantern's faint glow, his expression a mixture of pain and determination. "Mom, you need to understand. Everything we've done, everything we've hidden, it wasn't to hurt you. It was to protect you. From them." His eyes darted toward the shadows, and I could see fear flickering there, the kind I had never seen in him before. "Protect me? From who?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, trembling with dread. He looked at me, and in that moment, I saw the weight of years of secrets in his eyes. From people who would destroy this family. From people who will stop at nothing to get what they want. The shadows seemed to grow darker, shifting closer. I could feel the presence pressing in from behind again, cold and menacing. My daughter-in-law stepped beside me, placing a hand on my arm. "We don't have much time," she said urgently. "Have to trust us. Whatever is in those letters, it's only a part of the truth. There's more, and it's dangerous." I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. It's more dangerous than what I had already discovered. My pulse raced as I glanced at the scattered letters. Some names and events I recognized, but others I had never heard of before. My son gestured for me to follow him deeper into the shed, where another faint light glowed. I hesitated. Fear screamed at me to run, but something, a stubborn, desperate part of me, pushed me forward. My legs moved almost mechanically, carrying me toward the glow. As I drew closer, I could see another envelope on a small table, different from the others. It was thick, heavy, and sealed with red wax. The symbol on the wax made my stomach twist. It was familiar somehow, yet terrifying. "Open it," my son said, his voice low but commanding. "This is what they want you to see, the proof of why they came after us." I reached for the envelope, my hand shaking violently. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a cold breeze rush past me. I turned slightly, just enough to see movement in the shadows, something large and unnatural, something that wasn't human. My breath caught in my throat. Before I could react, the figure moved suddenly, stepping forward from the darkness with terrifying speed. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the envelope. My daughter Emla yelled, "No," as she lunged toward me, but it was too late. The figure loomed over me, blocking the faint light. I could barely make out its features, but I knew instinctively it wasn't here for conversation. It was here to take what belonged to them. And me, the envelope fell to the floor, spilling its contents. Among them, I glimpsed photographs, documents, and a name that made me gasp. A name connected to someone I trusted, someone close to my family, yet now I realized they had been plotting against us all along. The figure stepped closer, the shadows swallowing it almost entirely, and I could feel its cold breath on my neck. My daughter-in-law grabbed my hand tightly. "Run, now," she shouted. But before I could move, the figure reached out. And everything went black. I still remember that night as if it were etched into my very soul. Darkness had swallowed the shed completely after the figure's sudden movement, and my heart felt like it had frozen in my chest. I could barely breathe, each inhalation sharp and cold, and the letters on the floor lay scattered like pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. My daughter-in-law's hand was still gripping mine, her voice shaky but firm cut through the oppressive blackness. "You have to trust me," she whispered. "Don't fight it yet. We can still get through this." I nodded, though I was terrified, though every instinct screamed to run. My legs trembled beneath me as I struggled to stand upright, my hands shaking violently. I could hear faint, heavy breathing coming from the shadows, deliberate and almost human in tone, but it wasn't human. My mind raced with questions. What was this? Why had it come after us? And most importantly, how did it know where I was? Suddenly, a small spark of light flickered in the corner of the shed. My eyes darted toward it, and I could see my son emerging from the shadows, holding a flashlight. Relief and shock collided in my chest. "Mom, get behind me," he shouted, his voice full of urgency and fear. I followed him instinctively. Feeling the cold press of air behind me, the figure was moving closer. I could hear the scraping of boots or claws, the sound chillingly deliberate. My daughter-in-law whispered again, "We don't have much time. Everything we know, everything that's hidden, it's all in these letters. But we need to move now. They're not just after the keys, they're after us." My son grabbed a bundle of letters from the floor and shoved them into my hands. "These are the ones that matter. Memorize them if you can. Read them carefully later. Right now, we have to get out." We ran toward the small door at the back of the shed, but as soon as we reached it, I froze. The figure was blocking our exit now, emerging from the shadows with terrifying speed. I could see its face partially illuminated in the dim light, a face I recognized but didn't want to believe. Someone I trusted, someone I had considered family. My stomach twisted in fear and disbelief. "You shouldn't have seen this," the figure said, voice low, chilling, and full of menace. "Now you'll pay for it." My son pushed me behind him, standing between us and the shadow. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold it off." My daughter-in-law grabbed my hand again, dragging me toward a side exit I hadn't noticed before. I stumbled over the wet floor, my heart pounding, the letters clutched tightly to my chest. The sound of the figure chasing us echoed through the shed. Boots hitting the wooden floor with terrifying force. We burst out of the shed into the cold night. Rain had started falling again, the wind cutting at our faces like a knife. I gasped for air, but there was no time to rest. The letters were wet, the ink running slightly, but I didn't care. I just kept running, following my daughter-in-law and son toward the safety of the trees beyond the property. And then I heard Ida shout from the shed. My son's voice strained with effort, screaming my name. "Run. Don't look back." Tears stung my eyes as I glanced over my shoulder. The figure was coming out, but it was slower now. Something had happened inside, something I couldn't see clearly in the darkness. I felt a mixture of relief and dread. My son was fighting, risking himself for me, but for how long could he hold it off? The shadows of the night seemed alive, stretching and twisting around the trees. The letters in my hands felt heavier than ever, filled with secrets that could destroy everything. And I realized with a cold, sinking feeling that the danger wasn't over, not even close. Whoever had attacked us, or whatever it was, would not stop until they got everything they wanted. Then, from somewhere deeper in the forest behind us, I heard a low, menacing growl. Not human. Something else, something darker. It wasn't just my family in danger anymore. It was all of us. I still remember that night as if it were carved into my very bones. The forest around us was dark, almost suffocating, the trees swaying in the wind like looming sentinels. Rain soaked through my clothes, chilling me to the bone, but I barely noticed. My hands clutched the letters tightly, the papers wrinkled and wet, filled with secrets I could barely comprehend. My daughter-in-law pulled me along, and my son was just ahead, pushing through the underbrush. Each of us desperate to escape the unknown terror behind us. Every sound made my heart leap, the snapping of twigs, the rustling of leaves, and that low guttural growl that echoed through the trees. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Fear wrapped around me like chains. But I forced myself to keep moving, to trust my son and daughter-in-law. "We have to reach the cabin," my daughter-in-law whispered urgently. "It's the only safe place nearby. Just a little further." I stumbled over roots and rocks, the mud sucking at my shoes, the rain blinding me. My son's voice carried over the wind. "Almost there. Keep moving." But the sounds behind us were growing louder, closer. I dared a glance over my shoulder and froze. The figure or creature was following, moving through the shadows with terrifying speed. Its form was vague, twisted, but there was no doubt it was coming for us. Relentless and unstoppable. As we ran, I couldn't help but think about the letters in my hands. The secrets, the betrayals, the lies. They weren't just about the house or the keys. They were about survival, about protecting our family from something so dangerous that it had forced my son and daughter-in-law to make impossible choices. And now, after everything, I was part of it. I couldn't turn back. I couldn't hide. Finally, we saw the cabin ahead, a small, weathered structure partially hidden by the trees. Its windows glowed faintly, promising warmth, light, and maybe safety. Relief surged through me, giving me the strength to run faster. We reached the door, and my son fumbled with the lock. My daughter-in-law shouted over the rain, "Hurry! It's right behind us." The door creaked open, and we stumbled inside. My son slammed it shut and bolted the lock, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. For a moment, silence reigned. The only sounds were our pounding hearts and the rain hitting the roof. I sank to the floor, drenched and shaking, clutching the letters. But then I heard it. A low scraping sound right outside the cabin. Something heavy dragging along the wet ground. My stomach dropped. The lock held, but the growl returned, louder, now angrier, closer. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going away. It was patient. It was smart. And it wanted something. My daughter-in-law knelt beside me, her face pale but determined. "We can't stay here long," she said. "It knows we're here. It will find a way in. We need a plan. We need to understand the letters there, the key to stopping this." I nodded, terrified, fumbling to open the top envelope. Inside were names, connections, and instruction secrets that revealed who had orchestrated everything against our family, who had betrayed us, and what they wanted. My hands shook as I realized the horrifying truth. The danger was not just about property or money. It was about control, power, and survival. And now I was in the middle of it, fully exposed, with nowhere to hide. And then, from the shadows outside, I heard a whisper, soft, chilling, almost human. "You cannot run forever. We will find you, and then you will pay." I felt my chest tighten, my stomach twist, and a cold dread fill every inch of me. The cabin wasn't safe. Not yet. And the final confrontation was coming. I still remember that night as if it were carved into my very soul. The cabin was small, dimly lit by a single lantern, and the rain outside hammered the roof like a relentless drum. My heart was racing, my hands shaking, and my mind was flooded with everything that had happened. The attack at home, the stolen keys, the letters, the shadows, the growls, and the terrifying figure chasing us through the forest. I clutched the letters in my hands, desperate for answers, desperate for a way to survive. My daughter-in-law and my son sat close, their faces tense but determined. The cabin felt like our last refuge, but I knew it wouldn't hold for long. The shadows outside had grown restless, and every sound, every branch snapping, every gust of wind felt like a warning. My son finally spoke, his voice low but urgent. "Mom, we need to understand everything in these letters. That's the only way to protect ourselves. Only then can we face them." I nodded, hands trembling as I began to read aloud the names, connections, and secrets revealed in the letters. Each word, each line was more shocking than the last. I realized that the people who had attacked us weren't just after money or property, they were after control over the family. Secrets buried for years, and the power that came with them. My son and daughter-in-law had risked everything to shield me, to keep me unaware. And now the truth was finally in my hands. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed outside. The cabin shook and the growls returned louder, closer, angrier. My heart leaped into my throat. "They're coming," my daughter-in-law shouted, her eyes wide with fear. "We don't have much time." My son grabbed a small concealed box from under the bed. "Inside this," he said, "is what they fear the most. The proof of their betrayal, the evidence that can stop them. We can't let it fall into their hands, or ours will be lost forever." We huddled together, reading, memorizing, and preparing ourselves. The rain outside continued to pound, and the shadows seemed to press against the cabin walls. Then the door shook violently as something or someone tried to break in. My pulse raced, but I felt a strange sense of resolve. I had survived the fear, the betrayal, and the chase. Now it was time to face the truth. With a deep breath, my son flung the door open, holding the box aloft. The figure stepped into the cabin, face twisted with rage, someone I had trusted, someone who had betrayed us. But we were ready. My daughter-in-law and I stood beside my son, holding the letters and documents that exposed the truth. "Your time of hiding is over," my son said firmly. "The truth is here and you cannot stop it." The figure hesitated, realization dawning. In that moment, the shadows seemed to retreat. The presence that had haunted us for days lost its strength, powerless against the knowledge we now held. The growls faded, the air lightened, and the rain outside seemed less harsh. We had survived. The danger was over for now. I sank to the floor, exhausted, my hands still clutching the letters. My daughter-in-law sat beside me, her face softening as she whispered, "We did it. We survived. Together." My son nodded, relief and exhaustion clear in his eyes. We had faced the shadows, uncovered the truth, and protected our family. And in that moment, I realized something important. Life is full of unexpected betrayals, secrets, and challenges, but courage, trust, and love can carry us through the darkest nights. I had learned that even in fear, we can find strength. Even in danger, we can protect what matters most. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always a way to survive, to uncover the truth, and to protect those we love.